So the morning after, the night before, wow, wow. Still can't quite get over what we seen last night. And saying that, I sort of did get the fight we expected at the same time. Earlier, the stoppage than I expected. I want to say earlier, I mean earlier in the fight, not premature or anything like that. I already spoke of the brilliance of Alexander Usyk. I will do a separate video on that. I think it's not just the brilliance of him in the fight. I think it's a brilliance of him overall. I think we need to be made aware that Alexander Usyk is not. He is. He's something different. He's something special. He is a not just a generational talent, but he's a fighter who's really transcended the game in many ways. I mean, this is a Dubois video. I'm starting talking about Usyk, but it's true. He was going to Wembley Stadium to fight Daniel Dubois there. Daniel Dubois is even though Alexander Usyk is really the A side, they're both kind of 50-50. But the reception Usyk got from the British fans, it warms your heart in a way because he's loved. He's universally loved everywhere he goes. It's incredible. So, that's something that we need to talk about. We do need to have a chat about Daniel Dubois and what happened, what went wrong, and what we do moving forward. It's a history repeats itself, I guess. Those who do not learn from history are doomed to repeat it, as George Santayana once said. Right. It was a demolition job from Alexander Usyk, largely in part to the fact that Don Charles pushed the horses, as Alexander Usyk said. You fired him up, you motivated him, and the first round was the only round that was nip and tuck. I still gave it to Alexander Usyk. He couldn't really find a round to give to Dubois, except you could say he was aggressive in the first round. He did a little bit, but didn't do enough with it. Usyk was the guy landing the cleaner shots. From then on, it was just the Usyk show. Simple as. It was one-way traffic, really. Dubois' punch output dropped. He couldn't land the jab. And I said in my post-fight review, I said it in my Don Charles video, that, and I've said this before, and I've tried to push this point home through several times, that do I feel Dubois mentally in other fights seemed a little bit more with it? Yeah, I do. I do think that. I think having his dad there was definitely a common influence on him during crises. And when I say crises, I don't mean him being dropped or anything like that. Against Miller it got tough. Against Hrgovic it got tough. It was never really tough against AJ. Never really. But you get what I mean. He was able to come through that. But what Hatman spoke about maybe a year or so ago, God, a long time ago now, that maybe it's not even the fact that his dad is there. Maybe it's the fact that although Daniel Dubois is in, I don't want to say again crisis, maybe he's having hard times in these fights, he knows he's in the fights. He knows he can land his shots. He knows that although he is, say, Hrgovic is hitting me a lot, and I've not really, I'm not that I don't have an answer. I do have an answer. I'm able to land. I'm able to do what I want to do, albeit I'm shifting punishment. And that keeps him mentally in the game. We can all look at Dubois and we can make speculations about this, that, and the other. And it appears that that may be the case, that when Dubois is in a fight, even if it's a tough fight, if he's able to get his jab working, if he's able to get his shots going, if he's able to do what he needs to do, in spite of the fact that he's shifting punishment in retaliation, he's able to just stay grounded and stay with it. Because we've seen that in the last couple of fights. Against Alexander Usyk, it was like they got him and put him straight back in Poland 2 years ago. He was in there with a guy that he could not... The jab was irrelevant for Danny Dubois. He may as well have not thrown it. Because that jab that is so on point, gone, taken away. Completely taken away. He couldn't take centre ring. He couldn't get control of centre ring. Alexander Usyk, like that, he was able to read him. Pretty much, I want to say, from the first round, probably the halfway point, you could tell that Usyk had just downloaded the data and was like, I know what you're going to do. Boom, you're not doing it. And that was it. You could say the writing was on the wall from about a minute and a half into the first round. You were like... Because I never got the sense at all. And you sometimes get that in a fight where you're like, oh, I wonder would it... You just got the impression it was Usyk in control. And there was no issues. Like, none. None whatsoever. And with Dubois, you could see the confidence was just going and going and going. And he had no real answer. Once he was stopped from landing his shots, he was getting peppered with jabs, he was getting hit with left hands, the right hook was coming in. You could see that, the confidence was drained, and a great performance again, of course, by Alexander Usyk, a generational talent, of course. And when the fifth round came and he was dropped by that right hook, a big long look to the corner. It's not a good sign. He gets dropped with that big left hand, legitimately hurt. Legitimately hurt. Big, huge left hand. But he wasn't Anthony Joshua when Anthony Joshua got dropped by that right hand in the fifth round in their respective fight, where you could never have let that fight carry on. Joshua didn't know where he was. He'd try as hard as he did to get back to his feet, and it was a much heavier knockdown by a much bigger puncher in Dubois. There was nothing AJ could do. Michael Griffin did the right thing by stopping the fight, but Daniel Dubois instantly was able to walk back fully cognizant to his corner. That indicates to me he wasn't devastatingly hurt. He probably could have beat that count. He probably could have. But he was put back in Poland 2023 and he chose not to. Now, I'm not criticising him for that. I'm not in his situation. I don't know, thank God, what it's like to be hit by Alexander Usyk, to be in that position, 90,000 fans screaming, you're tired, you know whatever you do is not working. I'm not in that. I've never been in that position. I don't know what I do in that situation. It's easy to speculate and say I do this. You just don't know. So I'm not going to critique him for that. But it goes back to what's been said before about Dubois. When he's had to face adversity, and he's faced it before in his career, but when he's not been able to, like a bully almost, you know, let's say you've two bullies, they're fighting one another, they're both battering lumps out of one another, they're both able to go and, you know, they're both able to stay with it. Bully goes and he just meets someone he can't bully and he can't enforce himself or impose himself on that guy, they're gone. And you see it all the time. I used to see it all the time growing up, you know. I used to see it with guys. There was people in my neighbourhood and I used to always just laugh at them in school because like they would go for like the weakest of the weak, and as soon as like they were like, oh, he's actually weak but he's fighting back, they were just like, gone, see it, bye, good luck, yeah, I was never here. And I'm not saying Dubois is a bully in that sense, but he has that mentality. Once you take, he can be good, he can keep going in adversity if he's able to do what he needs to do. Because the minute you take his jab away, the minute you stop him being able to have his own success, it's just like he's checked out mentally. And that was what happened again tonight. And I think that, it's easier said than done to be able to do that against Daniel Dubois, because Joe Joyce was able to do it probably the only time in his career he ever boxed defensively, 5 years ago almost, against Daniel Dubois. And Usyk is just a phenomenal talent. He's a generational talent. I don't see how other fighters can replicate that. Possibly a Telma could, maybe. Possibly with the movement. But I think Dubois still has a lot to offer. He's 27 years old, people. If you turn pro at 27 as a heavyweight, people would say you've got loads of time. And he does have loads of time. He didn't shift an extraordinary amount of punishment in there. He got beaten soundly, but he didn't shift it. You know, it wasn't like Joshua who shifted a hell of a lot of punishment against Dubois in their respective fight last year. I still think Dubois has something, but the question is how do you go about fixing that? I really don't know. I really don't know. I don't think Don Charles is the right guy, but he's had Martin Bowers originally, then he had Mark Tibbs, then he had Shane McGuigan. Now he's had Don Charles. It's a conveyor belt to trainers at this stage. Well, what more? Who are you going to get next? I think with Dubois, there's always going to be that chink in the armour. You could have the late great Emmanuel Stewart, Eddie Futch alive and kicking, and they could be training Daniel Dubois. If he's put in a situation like that again, doesn't matter. I think same situation. I really do. It's something that is going to be there following Dubois, unfortunately, because he is a talented fighter, Daniel Dubois. He's got reasonably good balance, great jab against an orthodox, against a southpaw not so much, against Alexander Usyk not so much. There's a lot of rebuilding that needs to happen. Clearly very disappointed, and I don't, again with Dubois, I'm not going to be as critical of him as I was of Don Charles, because he really screwed Dubois with everything he was saying about Usyk and this, that, and as Usyk said, don't push the horses. With Dubois, I feel more like, in a roundabout way, he was the proverbial lamb to the slaughter. Rather, he was being led the lamb to the slaughter, and that's how I felt about that. I suspect he will come back. Oh, he'll definitely come back. I think they will take their time rebuilding him. They might look at the Joe Joyce rematch. They might look to match him against, a lesser heavyweight and rebuild him that way. I do fully believe that there is something still there in Dubois. I think he can have another run. I'll go out on a limb, right? I reckon Dubois will be heavyweight champion again. I do. I think he'll be a two-time heavyweight champion. I think he'll be champion again. But I think that's always going to be a problem, and I don't know how you I don't think you can fix that. The minute he faces adversity and he's not able to have his own success, he had adversity in the Miller fight. He had a lot of it in the Hrgovic fight early on. For every shot Hrgovic landed, he was able to retaliate. Wasn't able to do it in this fight, and we saw what happened. So that's something that's really going to be addressed. I don't know how we address it. But those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comment section below. As always, I hope you enjoyed the video. Smash the like button if you could. Hit subscribe if you haven't already. And until next time, people, I'll leave it there. Peace.